could make it more likely that OBJ is traded this offseason. Odell is on track in his recovery from an ACL tear. So, Brian, which team should go all out to trade for Odell?
You know, Greg, I think, first of all, I think Odell Beckham Jr. is going to come back completely healthy. This is one of those years for him where he's going to have to prove that he can remain healthy. I mean, he's been injured pretty much each of the last 2 or 3 seasons here. He has to be able to play 16 games to become that elite receiver that we once saw back when he was in New York. But to me, there's 4 teams that certainly should go all out to try to get Odell Beckham Jr. These are teams that have the ability to win. Maybe they're a player or 2 away. Number 1, the Green Bay Packers. Find a way for him to be opposite Davante Adams. He doesn't have to be Batman. He can be Robin here. He could be in a situation where defenses start to lean towards Davante Adams, and he's able to come on. And we know Aaron Rodgers will find them and find a way to get the ball to him. And the next team we think about is the Ravens. We got to think about Lamar Jackson's, his progression, his ability to get better as a quarterback. What's going to help him get better? A big-time receiver that he has confidence that can get open and is going to catch the ball when he has that opportunity. And the other thing about bringing Odell Beckham Jr. to Baltimore is that it's going to force Greg Roman to get out of this thing where we have to run the ball 50 times a game. Greg Roman has to understand that we have to open this offense up, and part of that is Lamar Jackson being a better quarterback. The third team is the San Francisco 49ers. Of course, they have to figure out the quarterback situation, but Odell Beckham Jr. can be a guy that can open up the field and make sure that everyone else has an opportunity to eat because defenses are focused on them. I love the way Kyle Shanahan kind of designs that offense and schemes things open. But the last team, to me, is kind of open. And to me, this is probably the most important. One of the things that I would like the most is wherever Deshaun Watson goes, where's that place that Deshaun Watson goes? Let's find a way to get Deshaun Watson and Odell Beckham Jr. together because we know how dynamic Deshaun Watson is with or without a great receiver. He's going to put up 4,500 yards, a bunch of touchdowns. If he can team up with Deshaun Watson and Odell Beckham Jr., I think that's a great pairing, something that all the teams in the NFL, especially defensively, will have to look out for.
Yeah, I like those teams, Brian. The one that I feel if they want to make an immediate impact and potentially win it all next year is Green Bay. The Green Bay Packers and Aaron Rodgers. And then you got to think about it. You possibly sell out to get a guy like Odell Beckham Jr. I think Davante Adams, he would make that work. Aaron Rodgers would make it work. But what would happen more importantly is that now you got your quarterback some help, and his attention turns back to being all in. I'm not saying that he's not all in, but he's peeking around trying to see what other options are available for him and what can he potentially do to kind of move his career in a different direction with a different organization potentially, if you're not willing to get him a guy or make a splash like a Odell Beckham Jr. But the team that I think also would be greatly suited with or without Jimmy Garoppolo is the 49ers. And it is because of Kyle Shanahan. So many people don't understand the offensive genius. I know we talk about it, but when we break it down, his ability, I'm talking, you got Deebo Samuel over there. You got Brandon Ayuk, both 2 young players. Deebo has been struggling with injury, and so health is a concern for him as well. And to your point, Brian, Odell has to prove that he can remain healthy. But if he can be healthy, he would drastically help this team. We're talking about a team that's a year removed from competing in the Super Bowl. They had a ton of injuries last year. If you can get those guys back on your roster healthy and you can add an Odell Beckham Jr., even if you stick with Jimmy G, you are a Super Bowl contending team. We already know that to be the case. Chris, what are your thoughts?
Well, I think you guys been peeking at my notes because I agree with all those teams. I think Green Bay, you're right. Show Aaron Rodgers you're all in. We talked about this on our radio show, Greg, The Odd Couple. They kind of have wasted the last decade of Aaron Rodgers' career, in not drafting skilled position players, not shoring up the defense. Now, lately, they've added, more of a running game. The defense is solid. You obviously got the great receiver in Davante Adams. Going to get OBJ would really be all in Aaron would have, nothing to complain about on that offensive side of the ball. So I think that's a great move. Baltimore, before I make the definitive decision that, you know what, Lamar Jackson's not going to be a guy that throws it really well, which that's where we are at right now. That's where a lot of people are. He just throws in the middle of the field. He's not throwing outside the numbers. He likes to hit the tight end, so on and so forth. I'd like to see him with an elite receiver. We saw what Stephon Diggs did for Josh Allen. We saw what DeAndre Hopkins did for Kyler Murray. I'd like to see Lamar with an elite receiver so I can truly make a real judgment on where he's at as a passer as far as hitting the receivers outside of the numbers. In San Francisco, I'd love them if they get Deshaun Watson. You make a good point, Greg. I mean, with Jimmy G, who's a solid quarterback, that might work too. But I love Deshaun and Odell Beckham Jr. in San Francisco. One place I don't want to see him, and it's been thrown out there in reports, Tampa Bay. If I'm Tampa Bay, my goal is to bring back Chris Godwin and Antonio Brown. And I don't think tons of teams are going to go after AB. I think they feel he's only really going to be on his best behavior with Tom Brady. So I think you can bring him back on the cheap. They'll probably lose Godwin, but with Mike Evans, Antonio Brown, Scotty Miller had a nice little season. You got all those tight ends. I think they'll bring Gronk back. I think they have enough. I don't know. I've already got AB. I don't know that I want to bring OBJ in the mix as well down there in Tampa.
I think you're right, Chris. I mean, having that chemistry in the locker room is just as important as having the right players on your team. And so that chemistry down there at Tampa worked last season. I would stick right with that. But I wanted to talk about, what Odell Beckham Jr. can mean to a team. And you mentioned it, Chris. You talked about Stephon Diggs, his ability to get open, his 166 targets, and what that meant to Josh Allen. That really meant Josh Allen going from a quarterback that had about 3,000 yards in 2019 to a quarterback that had 4,500 yards this season, from 20 touchdowns in 2019 to 37 touchdowns this season. That made this quarterback a whole different player. And of course, Josh Allen was on the way up already. We understand that. But I think when you add a competent receiver that can find a way to get open and you give him those targets like Odell Beckham Jr. was in his past, he can help a younger quarterback. He can help a team get over the edge. And when I think about it, there's a bunch of teams that need that type of help, but they have to have the right structure. They have to have the right culture. And those teams should absolutely be looking for a trade for Odell Beckham Jr., Greg.
Yeah, there's one other team that I feel like Odell could easily go in and impact right away, and that's the Washington football team. And Brian, I know you're going to have some pushback, but for me, when you look at it, and we've talked about him needing an established quarterback, but also a system that's in place. You got Terry McLaurin over there at the opposite position receiver. He's their number one guy. You got Taylor Heineke, who is very comfortable and confident within that offensive system that Scott Turner likes to run. They trust him. He was with them in Carolina when Ron Rivera was the head coach there. So he knows that offense very well. This team defensively is lights out. I like that fit for him as well. Again, it's not an established quarterback, but it's a quarterback who plays with a lot of confidence. So I would like to see that if that was an option available for him.
All right, speaking of